483, 483, I Need Thee Every Hour. Like mine can peace afford. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. I need thee every hour. Stay thou nearby. Temptations lose their power when thou art nigh. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. I need thee every hour. In joy or pain, come quickly and abide. Or life in vain. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. I need thee every hour. Teach me thy will, and thy rich promises be fulfilled. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. Let's do that one more time. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. Amen. Happy Sabbath.
So today I'm continuing with my testimony from last week. As you remember, I attended some Voice of Prophecy seminars or evangelistic meetings, and there I accepted Christ at an age of about 18 years old, rebaptized, and I petitioned the evangelist there to write me a letter of recommendation to go to a college not too far away from here to study the ministry. He was happy to do that for me, and without any money, with no prospects of any work or anything else, I was accepted, and I made my trek to PUC. You know, having no money, you know, their government is ready to lend you whatever. And it was through loans and grants and some money that I had saved up, you know, in the summers, I was able to pay for tuition and begin my studies. I'm going to kind of gloss over a lot of my experiences up there until my later years. It was in my junior year that I began to get more and more into the harder classes of theology, with homiletics, with Greek 1, with a lot of European civilization history, that I began to feel the burden of school, because those aren't easy classes. And eschatology, you know, studying last day events and all of that. And plus, you know, as I mentioned before, I wasn't really good at math. And there we had college mathematics that it just became overwhelming for me to take on all that load of school and still be able to, make passing grades. At one point, my Greek instructor came up to me and says, your grades are beginning to fall. And if you fall below a certain point, you're going to lose your grants. So I had to make some adjustments in my classes, and I dropped college algebra. It was the one that I said, okay, get that nemesis out of the way, and I'll deal with it later. And so Greek was very hard because, it's very complex, all the conjunctions that you have to do, all the, what do you call it when you do I am, you are, he is, all that, the conjugation of verbs, that's what it is. And so I had little bitty cards that I had written just the vocabulary and all the conjugations of all the verbs. And I'd be going around, walking around, just trying to memorize it. And because, getting all that thing into my brain was very difficult for me. And so I survived. And then my junior year, which was Greek 1, then I went into my senior year, which was Greek 2, which got a little bit more difficult because you get this Greek Bible and they give you all the vocabulary, and then you got to decipher what it says and turn that in, for part of your assignment. And as all the college classes, started building, I got really disappointed, or I wasn't really feeling comfortable in the path that I was leading. And so I went in and I decided that I was going to drop theology and go into being into education as a religious teacher. And so I made an appointment to go in and talk with the head of the Department of Education and mention to him what I wanted to do. And he said, well, what do you want to do with that education? Do you want to go to Mexico and teach? He says, because around here, I don't know if there'd be a room for you, being Hispanic, I think is what he was headed. And he says, going to Mexico and being a teacher over there would be better suited for you. So I left there, really, just kind of dejected, as why would somebody say that to me? And so I made a point that I would go back and I would really study in the Greek and all the other classes that were required for theology major. And so I buckled down and I prayed a lot and I struggled. And by the grace of God, I was able to pass those classes. But I still had one more class to deal with, which was college algebra. But during that time, I met my then girlfriend, Diana, and we began, I began coming to church with her. And when we came here, this sanctuary was just barely built. And I got involved in the church. I was a deacon, and later on I became an elder, and I was actually an ordained elder right up here in front. And I helped with the youth. We did adult Sabbath school, and it was a time, I don't know if David, you remember, and Laura, she's not here, how full this church was. I mean, we had a Sabbath school class up here in front. We had a Sabbath school class out here in the back. All the little classrooms in the cradle roll, kindergarten, youth, they were all full. We had even adult classes in the fireside room, mother's room, and in the library. I mean, this church was really hopping, and I was really excited to be a part of that. And in my senior year, I was so involved that they required us to, as we got into homiletics, to go out and to preach in other areas surrounding, Northern California. And my then girlfriend, Diana, we went to Redding, we went to Orland, we went to Ukiah, we went to Clear Lake, and even here in the sanctuary, going out and speaking engagements. And we were doing Sabbath school classes where I first met your dad, Mike, in St. Helena, because we were doing outreach at different churches for Sabbath school there. And through all that, came towards the end of the year where you have to meet with the conference presidents. And I looked forward to that because I learned that one of the interviewers was the pastor of the church where I was baptized. His name was, well, I won't say what his name is. But he knew our family very well because he was the pastor when we first entered into the church. And so I felt very confident that with meeting with him that, oh yeah, I will get a call because he knows me very well. And so before you go to these interviews, you put in there what you want, what you would prefer. I was predominantly English speaking, so I put on there, I would like to, be in a church where English is spoken. And so when I came in, he says, oh, so you want to get into the English work? And I kind of sat there, I go, I'm thinking I'm wanting to get into God's work, but okay, yeah, and I explained to him basically because I was predominantly more or less English speaking. And then so we went through that interview, and then I also met with the head of the Spanish division for Northern California. And so I met with him, and he looked at me and he goes, so you want to be a pastor? And I said, yes. And he says, well, are you married? And I go, no, I have a girlfriend. And he said, is she Caucasian or is she Mexican? I go, well, she's Caucasian. And he says, well, I hate to disappoint you, but you will not be accepted in the Spanish church if you're interracially married. And so I said, well, we can learn, so we can go ahead, we can learn the language to be able to function in that church. And he says, well, you can go ahead and try, but the odds are against you. And he says, well, does she play the piano? I go, yeah. She says, was she a nurse or anything? I go, no. So apparently she was telling me that there's something to fall back on, I don't know whether it was how much money, salary, whatever pastors make, but that was kind of the stereotypical thinking back then, that they play the piano, they're a nurse, and they help lead out in the church. And so needless to say that as when I graduated, I didn't get a call. Even though I went through a lot of the steps, I even call portered one summer in San Jose. I went through all that, but when at the end of my senior year, nothing like that ever came into play. So after graduating, I finally made it through math by the grace of God. And so after that, we stayed here at Yountville, and I worked odd jobs throughout the valley. There was a schism or something that went on in the church during my senior year, which was a controversy which kind of spread from the college throughout Northern California. Pastor Sam can elaborate on this, but the whole crux of the whole thing was the acceptance of Ellen White, righteousness by faith. And things began to create a division where several of the pastors did not accept Ellen White. And so it just so happened that the pastor we had here at the time kind of got swept into that movement. So after pleading with him and after meeting with the elders, and I think Pastor Sam, he actually met with him on several occasions to talk to him about in the direction he was going. But he stayed that way, and then as time went on, he was actually removed from this church as a functioning pastor. So we were without a pastor for several months. But in the interim, they were looking for somebody to fill in. I raised my hand and I says, I can do it. I want the opportunity to serve. But I guess through the influence of the conference and their connections with several of the professors up at the college, an individual was chosen who was my classmate when I was at school. He was a wonderful guy. I mean, he was smart, he was bright. He had his father as a great influence. And so I was disappointed in that I wasn't given the opportunity, but I welcomed him to be the temporary pastor. So I kept on with my duties here at the church. And later on, a new pastor was chosen, and it was Pastor Steffes. He came in. And so during that time, I was still looking I was working, I had 2 kids on the way after we were married. Well, not at the same time. We had 2 children at the time. And we were really struggling financially. And just so happened that a friend of mine who was colporteuring with me was living there in Napa, and he made friends with an individual who was a very popular guy in Napa. And just one tragic day, as he was riding his motorcycle up behind the Con Dam, that curvy road leads into Pope Valley. Well, anyway, he crashed his motorcycle and he was killed. And so being a very popular individual, he had a lot of friends. And so when they came for his funeral, they were looking for somebody to do the eulogy for him. I knew him, I got to know him very well because he was in martial arts, I was in martial arts, I loved sports, he loved sports. And so we got along very well. And so when nobody would actually come and eulogize him, my friend asked me if I would do it. And I said, sure, I'll be glad to do it. And so during this funeral, I gave the eulogy, and afterwards the family came up to me and hugged me and says, you described, his nickname was Butch. I said, you described him to a T. That's exactly the type of person he was, because we had similarities in personalities and the ability to talk with people. It just so happened that my friend went to the dinner afterwards for the guests that came in. And one of his uncle was actually a superintendent at Murr Island Naval Shipyard in the maintenance department. And he says, there's an opening over there for a entry-level electrician. He said, when did you guys come in and apply? And I had some experience in a little bit. I knew how to wire a plug or turn on a lamp or whatever. I had a guy that mentored me in some of the odd jobs that I was doing, who was an electrical engineer out of MIT. Well, he was the one that actually got me into putting in service panels and basically the basic theory of electricity. And so he asked us to go and apply, and I interviewed, and I was actually the only one that got the call to come in and work for them. It was a great opportunity for me. When I came and interviewed, he was one of the ones that interviewed me. And after the interview, after I told him about my limited experience, he says, well, we'd like to bring you aboard. And he says, and I want to thank you for doing the eulogy for his nephew that one day. And it's not because of the talent that I had. It was because I was willing to do that for his nephew. But it was a great opportunity where I excelled. They gave free classes in electrical theory. So I learned AC and DC, plus working on electric motors. And some of you have seen those big gantry cranes that are on the waterfront. You got the big boom and they travel on tracks. Well, I gotten so good at it that they gave me the opportunity to overhaul one of those electrically. And they're very complex because they got all these motors that have to turn the same direction, and they have to speed up, slow down, and so forth. So I was in charge of doing that. As it came to, well, I actually ended up becoming a journeyman there because of all the classes that I took. And then so at the end of the 1980s, so I'm dating myself, in the late 80s, from the federal government came out word of budget cuts in the military, and Mare Island was one of the ones that came up on the chopping block. And so what they do is they began to get rid of all those people who were hired at a particular time who were not veterans, civil service. And that's what I was. I was not a veteran, but I was in civil service. So I was one of the ones that actually got a letter of separation. And so at that particular time, we started, I went out and, looking for odd jobs. I actually applied to work in the post office. But my wife, while looking in the newspaper, found that there was job openings at the Shell Oil refinery in Martinez. They were looking for a journeyman electrician. And then so I said, okay, let's go and apply. So went and applied. I thinking nothing about it. I got reinstated back in Mare Island. And they kept on saying, no, we're not going to shut down after all. But, once you hear the word once, it's got to be happening. There's a little bird in the air flying around saying, hey, it's going to close, it's going to close. And so I went ahead and I went in, they hired me, and I went into work for Shell Oil. The following year, that place closed down. So here was another way where even though I didn't get a position as a pastor, God knew my needs. And he knew what I needed because I was struggling, and I was kept on praying for him to create a path for me. And he did. I just didn't see the right one. And then so when I went over to Shell, I was there 10 years. No, I was there 28 years. Started in 1990. And from there, I excelled in that facility. And I later on became a electrical inspector for the engineering department. I'm skipping through a lot of things because I only got a few more minutes. And so there, it was a very lucrative opportunity for me to put my kids through school, to buy a home, and to, take care of the things which I was struggling with. And God created that opportunity for me. And so went through there, I made inspector and got a lot of bonuses. I was actually one of the liaison from the Shell Oil Company into the Contra Costa Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, because we donated a lot of money doing charity work and everything else, and I was responsible for coordinating a lot of that from our company into the community. And so I finally, after 29 years, I retired. And during that time, I kind of slipped away from the church. I wasn't coming anymore. But my wife kind of kept on listening to religious music, and little by little, my heart started to come back and melt, and I realized that what I was doing was wrong. Neglecting my relationship with Christ, not coming in for the association in church. And as time went on, I lost 3 of my brothers. We had 5 brothers. One of them died from cancer. Another one had severe diabetes. He had a heart attack and he died. The brother was next to me, we got into trouble a lot. We would run away, we'd fight against each other, we'd make up, and we were like twins. He ended up getting diabetes, and his heart began to wane. And his health was really bad. He was on dialysis. And so we were going to go up. He lived in Seattle. He was a plumber. And so he wasn't really getting the right care that he was supposed to get. So we made a point for him to bring him back so that my sister could watch over him. And when I went over there, I met him the night before we were going to bring him, and he didn't look very good at all. And so the next day when I was going to go in, I was going to convince him to go back into the hospital, start up his dialysis. And then once he got strong enough, we would bring him home. He died the next day. When I got there to bring him home or take him to the hospital, he wasn't breathing, and I performed CPR on him. They taught us that at work, but you never, in your mind, think that it'll happen to someone who's close to you. And I started CPR on him. I had my wife call 911, and they were there within minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And so they pulled him out, and they worked on him out in the little driveway. And I sat there and watched as his life slipped away. And I said to myself, why didn't I pray with him the night before? And I didn't feel really qualified then to be able to tell anybody about God. And so I made at that point right there, I says, what if it was me? What if it was me that was lying there? Would I be ready to meet Jesus when he came again? And right then and there, I decided I need to change my life. I need to begin to pray, to look to God for strength and guidance in my life. And as time went on, it was 3 years, and I think it was 2 years ago, when we decided to come back to home. And I felt very comfortable. I was welcomed, and I felt really blessed to be back. And so I know I've left a lot of things out, but one of the things that reminds me every day that to continue to look to God for strength and guidance. The Apostle Paul says that, brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended it, which means the righteousness of Christ. But this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press towards the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. So I've made it a commitment to, forget about the things in the past. Forget about what I did wrong and look forward, making a new start. Because every day is a struggle for us. So every day I ask God to lead in my life and to help me along the way. Somehow to help others, to share, to let others that, we all struggle day by day. So have faith, take heart, and always lean on Christ because he's always there to help. Thank you.